All right, can everybody see my screen? Can I get a thumbs up? All right, cool. Looks good. All right, good morning. Welcome to Mod 2. We are so excited to have you here and to be getting started today. We'll be spending the next hour or two just kind of trying to give you a lay of the land and what you can expect in the next 6 weeks, get to know each other a little bit. And so in that vein, the very high level overview of Mod 2 is that now we are helping you move from building applications in Ruby and working in your terminal, as you're very familiar with from being fresh out of Mod 1, into actually working with the internet, with the World Wide Web, using HTTP and Rails to build full-fledged applications that people can interact with on the internet. And you also get that nice visual feedback of what you are building and an app that can do things in a more user-friendly way. So it's all really exciting stuff. We'll be talking about databases. We'll get into more of the details on the content that you can expect here in a minute. But for now, we'll spend some time introducing ourselves and just getting to know each other. I'll go first and then I'll ask Kelly to introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of just go down the list of all of you. So my name is Jameson Ordway. My pronouns are they, them. My hometown is McAllen, Texas. That's way down south of San Antonio, but now I'm based in Aurora, Colorado. And a little bit about me and how I got to Turing. I was working a lot of like food service industry jobs, some retail jobs. I don't have a professional academic background in teaching, but I was also doing music lessons one-on-one and working with a church and doing like youth director type of stuff before I found Turing. And coding was just kind of a hobby for me. A friend got me into it. I had never really done any programming in high school or college. So I was just coding for fun, and I came across a podcast called Code Newbie, which I highly recommend if you haven't already heard of it. But Saron was interviewing Jeff Casimir, and that's how I found out about Turing. And the mission and vision really stood out to me, and the length of the program really stood out to me. So I moved to Denver from McAllen and attended the backend program and graduated with the 1803 cohort. Since then, I've spent a little bit of time working at startups. I worked at a small startup in Denver called Silvernest, where it was a matching platform for people with extra rooms in their houses to rent out to housemates. That was an app that used Rails and vanilla JavaScript mostly. And then I worked for a little while at a fully remote company called User Interviews, where that platform was more for companies to collect feedback from users in a lot of various ways. So that was really interesting work where I was building in Rails and React. So that's a little bit about me and my professional experience in the industry. I'm going to stop my share for a moment here and turn it over to Kelly. If I could, rearranging my windows. Take it away, Kelly.
My only issue is I think I've forgotten the order of the wonderful slides you made. But I'm Kelly Murray, and then it's my pronouns are she, they, though I do prefer they, them. I'm actually from a lot of different places. I moved around a lot as a kid: Orlando, Houston, ended up in San Francisco. So I kind of consider myself a little bit from everywhere, but probably mostly from Durham, North Carolina, in the Triangle area there. I actually started coding when I was pretty young. I would say about 9 to 10. I was doing like little basic HTML stuff. When I went to college, I thought, oh, wow, well, I love this. I've been actually teaching it at the library there for a little bit. I could do this. I could go into computer science. And the director of the program sat me down and said, you got a B+ in Algebra 2. I'm not sure this is the program for you. So I internalized that for a very long time. I know, right, Jameson? And it took me a while to come back to coding. I was actually all the way in graduate school training to be a history professor when I started doing work for like public institutions. I ended up going out to San Francisco, teaching at Dev Boot Camp there a little bit, one of the first boot camps. Worked to the Iron Yard, taught there for about 5 or 6 years, and now I'm really excited to come back to teaching. In the meantime, between then, I've been working on the Watson team at IBM, using some of their software reliability engineering and developing some backend protocols. So anyway, it's a lot there, but it's really excited to meet you all. And then next, we're going alphabetically.
Sure.
Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda, she, her pronouns. My hometown is a little town called Wheatland, Wyoming, just north of Cheyenne. And I had been in the doing accounting for before coming to Turing, and kind of felt I just wanted a career change to challenge myself a little more. And also, I found that while I was working in accounting, I was really interested in how the software worked, more so than like the accounting. So I thought that coding would be a good fit.
Awesome.
Okay, I think I'm next.
Yeah.
Antonio. Yep, Antonio King, pronouns he, him. God, I'm from all over the place. Most of my life in California, in Northern California near Sacramento. And then I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, have a degree in geology. From there, I joined the Navy, was in the Navy for 6 years and was in Charleston, South Carolina, Saratoga Springs, New York, Washington State. I was stationed, I was on a submarine, which was pretty cool. And then when I got out of the military, I moved to Colorado to be closer to certain friends. But yeah, my background, like I said, all over. I was in nuclear power, geology. I was a project engineer for an acoustics environmental consulting firm. And then I kind of rediscovered an interest in software development through my last job, and pretty much took steps to be here almost immediately. So pretty excited.
Cool. Thanks. I think next we have Brett.
Hi, I'm Brett. He, him pronouns. My hometown and where I currently live is Boise, Idaho. What I was doing before Turing is nothing really too special. I was a student of political science, and then for like the year after that, I kind of just worked random jobs. Nothing really stuck, and it was actually kind of funny. I told my parents, I was like, I'm going to take some time off from working, and in those about 4 months, COVID hit. So out of those 4 months, I have now currently not been working for over a year and a half. So uh, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but Turing kind of came at the perfect time for me to like buckle down and actually get something. So coming out of this whole COVID, not leaving your house, hopefully I can have a career come out of it. So
awesome. I believe next we have, do we have a Brian? Yes, Brian F.
Yeah, hi. So Brian, he, him, originally from Marco Island, Florida. I live in Maine now. The reason for that is before Turing, like Antonio, I was in the military. Got out of high school, went to college, didn't really find what I wanted. I just wanted to do something. So joined the Coast Guard, I traveled all over, ended up in Connecticut and got out. And then I took a job in mid-level management for like a trash and recycling company up here. And I could just clearly see how like, it wasn't very fulfilling. And I could very easily see how the structure and routine, I could lose 30 years and not even really realize it. It was just go to work Monday to Friday, leave. It wasn't the right fit for me. So I kept seeing software development. I was always afraid to just pull the trigger. And it's probably similar to Kelly's story where, some people telling you probably can't do it. So eventually now here we are.
Cool. Yeah, I just want to throw out there that I failed algebra twice. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions around the skills it takes to be a good programmer. So I'm really glad that some of y'all with those kinds of influences are here. Let's go to Karina.
Corinna, sweet here, she, her, grew up in Rawlins, Wyoming. Been in Denver about 10 years now though. I was in oil and gas prior to this for about 8 years, kind of doing a bunch of different roles. My last role, as I was kind of exiting, I was kind of the business liaison between our developers and the business, working on a new procurement platform. So that kind of solidified my decision to come here. I have a few friends that have been through the program, like a lot of us here. We know someone who has done it and seen the success that can come from it. So made the decision to make the career change.
Awesome. Thank you. Caroline?
Hi, I'm Caroline, she, her. I'm from all over, but I guess mostly from Augusta, Georgia. I'm currently in Atlanta, Georgia. Previously, I worked as a photographer and in digital marketing. Yeah, I had a few friends as well who went to Turing, went through the program, and yeah, decided to make the career change to find something a bit more challenging and to hopefully find some better work-life balance.
Awesome. Let's hear from Dane.
Yeah, hi. My name is Dane. Pronouns are he, him, or they, them. My hometown, I grew up between Sturbridge, Massachusetts and Northampton, Massachusetts at varying points in my life. And then I moved out here about 7 months ago now. Wow, it's been that long. Yeah, last November. So yeah, pretty recent. And then what was I doing before Turing? I worked at animal hospitals for a while. Previously was working like a bunch of different random odd jobs. And I think that coming to Turing was a decision made mostly out of a profound professional unhappiness and general interest in coding and kind of having a lot of people in my life who also code. So yeah.
Very cool, thanks. Let's go to Dee.
Hey everybody, my name's D, he, him. Before Turing, I came from the fitness industry. Before everything like started shutting down, that was like a good chance to like switch industries. Sure, like a lot, like everybody else. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Where are you from again, Dee?
I'm from Colorado.
Thanks. Let's go to Elliot.
Hey everyone, Elliot, he, him. I'm from Denver, Colorado. Been here for a pretty long time now. Before Turing, I was pretty much all music stuff. So teaching music, running live shows, recording and producing music for people in my own band. And the music industry got hit pretty hard from COVID. So figured I'd just do a little bit of a switch up. I already spent my life staring at computers and I've always been interested in coding and programming. So wanted to do Turing, and I've had a couple friends do it too, and they helped convince me.
Awesome. Next up we have, is it Ezzy?
Yeah, you got it.
Great.
My name is Ezzy Al-Wafai, he, him. Originally, I'm from Beirut, Lebanon. I moved to the US in 2007, lived in Memphis, Tennessee for a while, 10, 12 years. Been here in Denver, well, Westminster for the last 4 years. Before Turing, I did banking, finance, and at my last job, I did mortgage at Hapta for Humanity, and 4 people there did Turing, and they recommended I check it out. And I've always been interested in coding. So yeah, I really wanted to get out of finance. So I decided to check it out. So here I am.
Cool. Thanks. Let's go to Gunnar.
Oh, hello. My name is Gunnar, pronouns he, him. I'm so sorry, I have to look at the questionnaire again. Oh, my hometown. I'm just from Lakewood, Colorado. I'm literally just on the suburbs. Nothing too exciting. And then I guess what I tell people in my previous life, I guess you call it, is I was a professional bartender, but that's just a fancy way of saying like I was a chemist. I don't know. I think it's kind of vice versa. You just mix stuff. Not that cool. Anyways, good to meet everyone.
Cool, thanks. Let's go to Jacob Martinez.
Yes, Jacob Martinez, pronouns are he, him. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, so I'm familiar where you're from, Jameson. What was I doing before Turing? I've done a lot of stuff from management to like teaching. My last job was a remote job, and that was before COVID, so I kind of didn't suffer as much as a lot of other people. yeah, and I'm deciding to do touring now because my fiance just graduated with her master's, and now she gets to be my sugar mama.
Cool, thank you. Love seeing that people from South Texas can now attend touring without leaving South Texas. Jacob P.
Hey, the other Jacob, he, him. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I've been in Austin, Texas for almost 10 years now. And that whole time been brewing beer. So I chose touring to find something a little less labor intensive, something with some longevity, and like Caroline said, a little more work-life balance.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Jason.
I'm Jason. My pronouns are he, him. I've been living in Arizona pretty much most of my life. I was born originally in Nebraska. Before touring, I did financial sales. I worked at Chase Bank for most of that in my 20s, coming up on my 30s now. Got interested in programming because when everything started shutting down, a lot of my friends became online friends and most of them did back-end engineering development. So I kind of developed an interest in that just from my friends groups who I hung out with the last year and a half.
Cool. Let's hear from Kim.
Hey y'all, I'm Kim, she, her pronouns. Hometown is Charleston, West Virginia. And I've been in Denver for like 12 years now. And before touring, I was in the beer industry. I was like a bartender and a brewery assistant. And then after that, I was in solar industry for like 4 years, designing residential solar, which I loved, but it didn't make very good money. So here I am.
Thanks, Ken. Let's hear from Lee next.
Hey everyone, Lee here. My pronouns are he, him. My hometown is La Grande, Oregon, which is in the middle of nowhere in Northeast Oregon. Like the closest airport is Boise. I went to college in Michigan for 4 years, and then I've been in Colorado ever since. Most recently here in the Englewood area, which is in the south part of Denver Metro. What was I doing before touring? I was mainly working in digital marketing, but kind of specifically in the political industry. So I got pretty burnt out on that for some obvious reasons. And the last 2 years I was working for myself. So I also got kind of lonely. So the team aspect was something that drew me to touring and coding as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Next up, we have Marla.
Hi, I'm Marla, she, her. Originally from Fort Worth, Texas, but got out of there pretty quickly. So I've been all over the place for a while, and then Colorado for the past 6 years now. I'm currently in Denver right now. Before touring, I was in theater and dance. I got my master's in dance from CU Boulder and was teaching there for a bit as a lecturer. And then a lot of my research in dance was kind of dealing with cognitive science. So I did a lot of dance and musical theater, and so I was really interested in how the mind and body kind of work together. And that led me into some like machine learning and AI theories and stuff. And so, yeah, have kind of been interested in like the coding thing for a while, or at least like the mechanics of it. So yeah, then decided to come to touring.
Very cool. Let's hear from Matt T.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Matt, pronouns he, him. I'm originally from Boulder, Denver area. Right now I'm in Arizona. Before touring, I was an arborist, and I didn't want to be like that crusty old dude still doing tree work in his like 50s and stuff. So I figured I would change up my career. And yeah, one of my friends like a year or two ago just recommended I look into coding. And so here I am, and I'm psyched to be here.
Cool. Matt K. Yeah, Matt K.
Hey everyone, my name is Matt. My pronouns are he, him. My hometown is a city called Vista in North San Diego County. And before touring, I had a lot of different jobs. I've done construction. I almost became a sushi chef at a little sushi restaurant. I spent a little bit longer doing some animal care work with the Humane Society, and eventually transitioned into being a certified personal trainer. I worked in fitness just like Dee. I took on a health coach certification right before the gyms shut down, and it never really afforded me the kind of stability I was looking for in life. So I knew several friends who highly recommended a career in programming to achieve that work-life balance and be able to feel fulfilled and still be able to do things that you're interested in. So I'm happy to be learning again. I missed school, and I'm happy to be learning alongside all of you.
Cool, thanks. Let's go to Michael.
Hi, Michael, pronouns he, him. I grew up in the suburbs south of Seattle, a place called Kent, Washington. And then I've been living downtown Seattle for the past 10 plus years, maybe 12-ish now. And before touring, I was a graphic designer. More specifically, I was a production artist, and I was in the apparel industry.
Cool, thanks. Samantha?
Hey everyone, my name is Sammy. Pronouns are she, her. I'm from Wheaton, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago. Before touring, let's see, I was a server in college. I studied Spanish at the University of Iowa. And then I was a teacher in Spain for a year, and I was an au pair and a nanny, and then realized I hated working with kids. So then I moved back to the States, and I loved, working with logic and solving puzzles. And so I knew I wanted to go to touring. So to save money, I became a server at this bar and restaurant in Chicago, and then quickly learned that adults on alcohol are worse than kids. So luckily the pandemic hit, got to get out of there and just kind of start touring earlier than expected. So here I am.
Great. Let's go to Scott.
Hello, my name's Scott, he, him. My hometown is a little town in Massachusetts called Sandwich. And before touring, I was a geotechnical engineer, which in short is just like playing with dirt and designing foundation systems. And I liked a lot of aspects of it as far as like the technical stuff and whatnot, but I wanted to do more of like the designing systems and that sort of thing, which I enjoy.
Thanks, Scott. And then let's go to Taylor.
Good morning. My name is Taylor, he, him pronouns. I'm from New York City originally, but I grew up in Colorado Springs and then came up to Boulder to study marketing at CU. I've been in Boulder now ever since, almost 11 years. My pre-touring, my college internship turned into a full-time job at a company that does telecom infrastructure. I was there for almost 7 years, and just prior to the pandemic was on a team doing some QA and backend scripting. Unfortunately, the pandemic dissolved that team. I was getting moved back to my old department, which I didn't care for quite as much. So pretty much through the entirety of the pandemic, I was hunting for my best option to pursue a career in software development. Spoke with a couple of alum that were at the company and heard nothing but great things. So here I am, and really excited to be here and get started on Mod 2 officially.
Cool. Thank you very much, everybody. Did I miss anyone? Just like to make sure. Okay, in that case, great. Let's take a palm here and come back at 10:35. Cool. So as everybody is coming back, if you could turn on your cameras, if that's something that you can do, we really appreciate it. It helps me know who is back and ready to get started again. Cool. Give it another second or two. All right. So a couple things I'll mention before we dive right into like slides and stuff like that. A couple of things. The first is that if you have a question at any point this morning or in any class, just go ahead and use the raise hand reaction that Zoom provides. So if you all want to give it a try, if you haven't used it before, there's the reactions tab at the bottom. You can click raise hand and we will get to your questions as we can. And you can lower your hand as well if your question gets answered. And yeah, the other things that we'll kind of consider norms for the mod are that the chat you can absolutely use and you can put questions in the chat, but we won't actively be monitoring the chat for questions. You can definitely feel free to raise your hand if you see a question in chat that you think would be worth to address with the class time. But if you want us to like pause and answer a question for you, go ahead and raise your hand. That way we know to stop. We won't actively be monitoring the chat. We don't want it to be like a distracting thing, but we mostly use the chat for like fun and just y'all kind of talking amongst yourselves. Cool. The other piece that I wanted to mention is that we really do prefer for people to have their cameras on when possible. It helps us as instructors just kind of gauge people's engagement and if what the words coming out of our mouths make sense. But if you can't have your camera on for some reason, especially if it's going to be an extended period of time, I'd appreciate like a little bit of communication about that. You can DM either of us or both of us. And when we're coming back from Pomodoros, if for some reason you can't have your camera on, it's also totally fine to throw like one of these reactions up, like a little ta-da emoji or just something to indicate that you are here with us. Cool. Yeah, all that being said, I think I'm going to jump into some slides. And yes, if questions come up, raise your hands and we'll get to those. All right, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Mod 2 will have a much bigger focus on the browser and presenting data in a browser and organizing it in a way that a user can interact with. So what that actually means in practice is that we'll be learning a lot about how the web works. We'll be learning about HTTP. You don't need to memorize this right now, but HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and that's how these devices communicate across the internet. So up to this point, it's likely that most of your experience has been with Ruby programs that you interact with in your terminal, things that are just happening on your local computer, your machine. And now we are branching out to this really exciting territory where we get to communicate with machines all over the internet. We get to communicate with other people's code. And we get to work collaboratively on that and then just, yeah, see the results in a browser like you would any other website that you visit on the daily. We'll be learning a lot about Ruby on Rails and its conventions. So you're familiar with Ruby now. We're familiar enough with Ruby to add this framework called Ruby on Rails. We'll just call it Rails for short. And it does have a lot of conventions. There are a lot of new syntaxes and dependencies and packages that can be used in conjunction with Rails. And there's just a lot to remember and memorize and get familiar with. So a lot of Mod 2 will be spent doing that. You've likely had a big focus in Mod 1, I'm guessing, on testing and test-driven development, and that theme will continue through Mod 2. We'll be writing different kinds of tests to test different behavior and test our applications more thoroughly, and different types of behavior require different tests and all that good stuff. The last kind of big bucket here is Active Record and SQL. So if you think about your favorite website, what drives that website and what makes it interesting is data. If you went to Twitter and you couldn't post any tweets or you couldn't read anybody else's tweets and there was nothing stored in the database anywhere, that would be a really boring website. So Active Record and SQL are tools that we use to work with data in our applications and really start to focus on what it means to be a backend developer in the context of a web app. So I'm going to go ahead and probably stop sharing these slides so that we can take a look at the Mod 2 homepage. Give me a second. I will also drop this in chat so that everybody can follow along. One moment here. So this is where you can find all of the resources, all of the lessons, pretty much everything that you will need for Mod 2. And I would definitely recommend that you spend some time, some of your own time going through this in more detail. We won't look at every single link or resource available here, but I do want to have like this overview. So the first thing is the learning goals, and this is one I would definitely recommend spending some time on. We will be using this terminology of these three kind of levels of understanding for the learning goals in Mod 2, and those are mastery, functional, and familiarity. So with mastery, we really want to be sure that by the time that you promote to Mod 3, you can really explain and implement the concepts in this category pretty independently, or with maybe some notes or light Googling and such. Functional definitely want some level of understanding about how the concept works and where it would be appropriate to implement it. Know how to go to the documentation or a collaborator and get more information about the topic if you need it. And familiarity, these are just things that we want you to have, just a very basic understanding of. You don't necessarily need to feel comfortable implementing it in one of your projects, but these are the things that we'll be introducing in Mod 2 that we want you to start thinking about. So mostly what I'll cover here is like the big categories under mastery. Like I said, if you can take some time on your own to read through this and just be aware of kind of the things to expect, that would be great. But at a high level in the mastery category, we're going to be focusing on Rails application development. This means we'll be working with resources. So things in our database, we'll be creating them, we'll be retrieving them or reading them, updating records and deleting and destroying records. We'll learn about a design pattern called Model View Controller, which is central to how we're going to be using Rails. We'll be talking about routing, creating routes to view resources and interact with these things that live in our database. There are a few other things here I won't go into great detail about. Active Record is something that we use in Rails specifically to work with our database. It is kind of the go-between between our Ruby code and the SQL that actually makes changes and retrieves things from the database. And then on the subject of databases, we'll be talking about relational databases and how to organize those, how to normalize your database so that you have data integrity, referential integrity. You'll be able to write migrations to create tables and relationships between them. For testing and debugging, we'll be continuing to learn about RSpec and introduce some new tools that we use in RSpec, like Capybara. We'll be targeting CSS selectors to test specific elements of the page. So if you got good CSS practice in over the intermission, I think that's one of the key places that it'll come in handy. We'll be testing for not just what we expect our user to do, but for what happens when our user does something unexpected. There are a few more things here worth looking over in your own time. For web applications and project management, we'll mostly be studying, like the big thing to take away here is that we'll be looking at HTTP and how that relates to our applications in the greater context of the internet. So those are the learning goals. Let's see, what do we want to do next? Right, so next here we've done the intermission work, so let's go over to lessons. And every lesson that we have taught in Mod 2 is here. We will not be teaching every single one of these in your Mod 2 experience. The other place that you'll be able to find the lessons as they happen will be on the calendar. So for instance, later today, we'll have our model testing lesson, and the lesson will be linked here. And for the lessons that you don't see on the calendar, the ones that we're not teaching in Mod 2, they are not need to know. They are here as references if it's material that you're interested in or something you want to implement in a project later on in the mod especially. But for instance, like cookies and sessions in Rails, this is a subject that's moved to Mod 3. So we won't be teaching this and you're not expected to know the material. That being said, if you're just looking for a lesson, they're all going to live here in the lessons page. For projects, we have 4 projects this mod. The first one will be kicking off later this afternoon as a paired project called Relational Rails. Then you'll have a solo project called Adopt Shop. Then you'll have the little SD Shop, which is a group project, groups of probably 3 or 4 in weeks 4 and 5. And then the solo project will be in week 6. That's bulk discounts. If you click on any one of these, it will take you to the spec or the instructions for that project. Each of these look a little bit different. So we will have a project kickoff for each one just to make sure to cover any of the different expectations or questions that you may have at the time of the project. Clean up my windows here a little bit. Yeah, I will. Does anybody have questions so far? What is coming up for y'all? Anything about lessons or learning goals or projects before I move on? Very cool. Okay, so we do also have these resources and exercises pages. This is not required material, but some of it can be very helpful. Here in resources, this is mostly just, extra study material. So if there's a particular topic that is challenging, let's say you're working on some tests and you really are struggling with FactoryBot, you could come into the resources page and see kind of this. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily call this an exercise, just kind of a little bit of a walkthrough for an example of how FactoryBot could work. This could be extra valuable practice. And I'd say that theme carries through all of this. If there's anything that you would like to explore further, or maybe need a little bit of extra practice on or clarity on, the resources page has a lot of really good articles and videos. The one that I really want to call out here as extra helpful, I think, and this is probably more useful later on in the mod, is the one at the very bottom called How to Write a Great README. As you move through your Turing journey, documentation becomes more and more important. And READMEs, in my experience, are something that employers really look at when they're looking at your projects or your GitHub. They want to see what you have said about your own project, about your own code. And this has a lot of, there's no really one correct way to write a README, but this has a lot of great suggestions and places to get started. So I would definitely recommend at some point in the mod, you spend some time reviewing this resource. But like I said, none of these are strictly required. As far as exercises, same thing. These are here to provide you with extra stuff to work on if there's a subject that's particularly challenging. What I will say here is that the active record obstacle course is something that many students really benefit from. And just to kind of drive home how beneficial this exercise can be, this used to be required to pass Mod 2. And it's not anymore. We found that not everybody really needs this much practice with active record, but I would definitely recommend it as something to keep in mind. Active record's a big subject and one that tends to be an area where people struggle before things really start to click. So the active record obstacle course is a great place to just kind of hone your skills in that area. So the other things that I'll call out here are we do have some Rails practice. So if you were going through Task Manager over the intermission and saying, I'm writing this code just because it says to write this code, it's not making sense. How do I get familiar with this process on my own? These are really great exercises that are going to be similar to our independent challenges and our mid-mod and eventually the final. These will have you practicing similar skills to all of those. Independent challenge practices are probably even closer to what you can expect for the mid-mod, for example. These are like previous projects that we've used for independent challenges, and they touch on all the same subjects that you will want to be familiar with by the time we get to week 6. There is a Ruby exercise in here, as well as a diagramming exercise for the web applications section. Again, nothing here is required, but definitely good to know about, especially if there's a particular topic you'd like more experience in. So, and I guess one thing I didn't mention here, Blogger, I wanted to call out as one that has been really helpful for people in the past. It's a little bit of a longer exercise, and I don't know that it is entirely up to date with the versions of Ruby and Rails that we are using, but you may hear like upper mod students recommend it. And I would say Blogger is a really good thing to practice, but it's a little bit bigger in scope and probably better for later on in the mod as well. Cool. What do we have here? Just making sure I don't miss anything. The Rails exercises, I think really most of the information that you would need to complete these is in the README, but of course, if any questions come up about any of these resources and exercises, you can ping us in the cohort channel and we will try to help you through that. I think Unless there are any questions, I don't see any hands. Let's go ahead and move on to the requirements for the mod and kind of what our expectations are as far as, classwork and all that stuff. Portfolio is the first one here on the list. We don't need to go into this in too much detail. We'll talk about it again when the time for portfolios rolls around in week 6. But essentially, at the end of the mod, we'll be asking everybody to meet with one of us one-on-one and give a brief presentation about what you've learned in mod 2 and how your plan is shaping up for mod 3 and beyond. The requirements are listed here. Just a few things that we'd like to hear you speak on. So some thoughts about Gear Up, some thoughts about working in teams, a reflection on feedback that you've given and received over the course of the mod, and then also just your professional development vision as that develops. So yeah, again, I won't spend too much time here. All of this is here for you to review, but won't be really important until at the end of the mod. Motion, let's see, where do I want to go first? I think before I talk about the promotion requirements, we can talk about assessments and the rubric that we'll be using for the vast majority of the assignments in mod 2. So this is the rubric. We have the 4 major categories that we're looking at. The first is completion. Did you complete the stories that we asked for? Is it functioning the way that we expect? Are there any bugs, et cetera? All that falls under the completion category. Then we have model view controller, which is the design pattern that I mentioned earlier, and we'll be learning more about this week. So I won't go into that in too much detail, but that is one category we'll be looking at in assessments later on in the mod. Active record is another big category. So we really want to see that you all have a great level of comfort with active record and using it to accomplish data tasks in your application. There will be cases where you might be able to accomplish something writing Ruby code, but there will be a more efficient way to do that task with active record. And we really want to make sure that you all are comfortable identifying those situations and using active record rather than using Ruby, and using active record correctly. And then the last category is testing and test-driven development. So it's probably pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, we'll just be expanding on your knowledge of RSpec and adding in a few tools to make testing in Rails specifically more robust. And as far as the expectations here, we have 4 for exceptional, 3 for passing, 2 for below expectations, and 1 for failing. And when you're looking at the assessments on the calendar, basically the ones where we're taking scores that would count towards your promotion, that's all going to be happening in week 6. That would be the final assessment and the final project. Weeks 1 through 5, I really want to make clear we are focused on growing and experimenting and learning and exploring all this new content and asking lots of good questions and getting the practice and the muscle memory in place to then evaluate in week 6, okay, where do you land on this rubric as far as the final assessment and the final project are concerned. And for the entirety of the rubric, ideally we would want everything on any of these assessments to be 3s or above, a 3 on completion, MVC, active record, and TDD. That being said, if you have at least a 3 in completion and maybe a 2 in active record, for example, or you have a 3 in everything except TDD and there's a 2 in TDD, that's generally acceptable as well. What we would want to avoid is, maybe having 4s or getting into extension work for these categories, but being at a 2 or a 1 for completion. So I really like the saying, done is better than perfect. And if you are getting through the user stories, that's giving you opportunities to practice the content that we really want to drive home in mod 2. And occasionally, maybe for the final assessment, for example, if there's a bug in an active record query, but you're at a 3 in every other category, we might ask for a quick refactor just so that you can demonstrate to us that you understand how to go fix that issue with a little bit more time. But generally, I'd say the best thing to aim for would be 3s in all of these categories. Again, none of your scores will count towards promotion until week 6. There will be times where we take scores and share feedback with you, but those are mostly for your own information to know where to focus your time and your energy and your effort, and to give you, good, hopefully valuable feedback to get you ready for week 6, where we'll really be evaluating whether or not we think you are ready to continue on to mod 3. So on that note, for promotion to mod 3, all of this is here. We have the learning goals linked as well, just to keep those top of mind. We have these projects, which are all graded. And again, week 6 final solo project, that's the one that you must pass in order to be promoted. And that is a solo project. The final technical assessment, same thing. That is the one that you will need to pass in order to promote to Mod 3. If you do not pass the first final assessment, there will be an opportunity to retake the assessment. Very likely it will be the following day, and it will be a different exercise, but touching on the same points as the final assessment. So there is an opportunity for a retake, and I will open that, try to remember to come back to it. Professional development. Oh, the other thing, sorry, I meant to mention about the final assessment is that it will be in a very similar difficulty to the mid-mod. So our goal is to present you with a mid-mod that can really be like a practice run for the final. And that will be, we try to make it as close to the middle of the mod as possible. And that can hopefully provide you with like enough feedback to really know what to focus on in the remaining time of Mod 2. For those, we provide individualized video feedback where we will pull down your code and review it and share our thoughts, and also share scores from the rubric. And we've gotten some feedback in the past that that's been really valuable for students. So we're going to continue doing that. And that is one place where you can expect very detailed, individualized feedback on your code. I think I have a slide coming up here on feedback in general, so I won't say too much there, but that's something to look forward to as far as just kind of like a benchmark to see how you're doing in the mod. And again, the mid-mod is not graded towards promotion, but we're sharing those grades because we really want it to be as similar to the final as possible to give you an idea of what to expect. Okay, looks like we already looked at assessments. For professional development, there's a link here. I won't go into this in great detail either because you have your own PD coaches and that kind of thing, but you will be expected to attend all the sessions or make up any that you need to miss and complete all of the PD deliverables. And you can read more about that content here. It's also linked in the main page of the Mod 2 backend page. Let's see. Okay, I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about the calendar and how we just share information in Mod 2 and make sure everybody's on the same page, but I'll pause here again for questions. What's coming up for y'all? Any questions that you have? Antonio.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of what we learned in Mod 1, how concerned should we be about like maintaining proficiency? Like, are we going to be using most of that knowledge, or there's some things that like you learned a lot of stuff, but you might not really touch on that until Mod 3? How do we go about like staying up with Mod 2, but also maintaining some level of proficiency with that if we might not be using it?
That's a really good question. I think there's a couple of different facets to that. So I think the big thing to keep in mind is that Mod 2 is kind of both an expansion on the topics that you learned in Mod 1 and also a very different skill set to be successful in Mod 2 and to really comprehend the material than in Mod 1. That being said, in I believe it's week 5, we'll have a Ruby review where we'll do a Ruby challenge. It'll be a lot like the other independent challenges that we give for you all, but those will mostly be in Rails, but we will have one that's in Ruby to kind of just give you a chance to jog your memory and practice that a little bit. And we will review that together as a class. So that'll be one place where you can really focus on Ruby. The other thing I might recommend, I have always recommended to people, you know, probably it probably is not the best use of time, or you're not setting yourself up for success by jumping onto your laptop the second the class starts, right? I like to suggest for people to get into class, you know, 3 to 5 minutes early. It gives us a chance to take attendance and just kind of get an idea of who's here and ready to go. But it also gives everybody time to really be in a good headspace for class and be warmed up and ready to go with some questions. So if you are particularly concerned about maintaining your Ruby skills or anything really that you learned in Mod 1, that might be a good time, you know, maybe 15 minutes a day. That could go a really long way just logging on a little bit early and maybe getting in some practice on a Ruby code challenge or something like that. But overall, I would say that Mod 2 feels very different from Mod 1, and we are introducing a lot of new tools and a lot of new terminology. So if really the bandwidth that you have is just to keep up with the class material and be engaged in class, that's fine too. I think that Ruby will make its way back into your life before you know it. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I do have one question. I heard something about Madeline, the tutor, no longer being available. Does that mean we don't have access to a tutor anymore? Or is there someone that's been reassigned?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think I've seen some conversation in Slack, but I'll have to get back to you. We do try to have a student support specialist available, but I also know that we don't always have someone. So I will try to remember to get back to you all about that and post in the cohort channel.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, cool. So I want to talk about the calendar a little bit. If you go to this Mod 2 backend page, you'll see we call this an iframe. We have a little calendar dropped in here into the page. And this will show you everything that is happening, like basically your schedule for Mod 2, everything that you can expect. But I do recommend adding this to your calendar. Yeah, it's just going to tell me it already exists. I guess they changed how that works. So it doesn't even give me a pop-up anymore. But if you do go here and you don't have the Mod 2 backend calendar already connected, you can click this button and it will integrate with your Gmail calendar. If you don't have a Google Calendar already, I think it's a good idea to go ahead. Personally, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and create one, even if it's just for touring things. There are just more features here in this calendar than there are in the iframe. And you can get, your notifications or whatever works best for you for managing your schedule. But this is really where we try to put everything that you will need. So like I pointed out earlier, you'll have the Zoom link. So whichever instructor is giving that lesson, we will put our Zoom link here for you to find easily. And then there will be a lesson plan. Sometimes there will also be like a slide deck or something like that, other relevant information. We have sometimes used Jamboard in the past for taking questions. So all of that will live in the calendar event. The other things to be aware of here, and let's see, I can clean up my calendar a little bit just to give an idea of what y'all will be seeing. We will have things like project check-ins, and we haven't updated this yet. We will well before Thursday, but there will be a link here for you to select a time slot for your project check-in or your project eval, whatever the event is. And then there will also be a few asynchronous homework assignments that we ask you to do. I'll pause here and talk a little bit about why we're doing these this way. Oops, sorry, everybody. Okay. So with these homework videos, we found that some of the lesson plans had a lot of just code writing and follow along and almost like a tutorial kind of style to them. And those are great. And I think it's really good, especially early in the mod, because like I said, there's so much new content, new terminology, new tools that we're asking you to use. So it's definitely beneficial for you all to have an example to follow, especially in the beginning, right? But what we don't want is for classes just to become this thing where you click onto a Zoom call and then we talk at you for a couple of hours and then you leave the Zoom call and then maybe questions come up and there's just like a delay in communication there. Our goal with these videos that we started doing last mod actually is to give you all time to parse through the tutorial style material, experiment a little bit, walk through it on your own, see an example, and then have questions that you can bring to class the next morning, which gives us a chance to really have dialogue about the material. And chances are if you ran into a question in the video, somebody else probably has or will have the same question very soon. So that's kind of the reasoning and the logic behind these homework videos, and you can find the links in the calendar. They're just on YouTube. Yes, I think that's all I have to say about the calendar at the moment. What else do I have in my notes here? Give me a moment. Okay. Marla.
Yeah, so with the homework stuff, we're doing that evening. So the expectation is that the next day we'll have a lesson that will touch on those things that we can ask questions about, or are we supposed to reach out separately outside of that?
Yeah, great question. That you definitely can send us a DM, or what I might recommend is post in Code Help and tag us. That way, you know, there is that visibility into the question. You can all kind of learn together as a group, and maybe somebody else will have the answer before we get to it, because there's, you know, 25 of y'all and 2 of us. But yeah, the expectation is that when you do these homework videos, we will have a class very soon in the week, probably the next day. Depending upon if things have to move around on the calendar, it might be 2 days ahead. But yeah, that's the expectation, that you do it on your own. It's self-guided. You don't have to turn anything in. There's no deliverable for this homework, but it is content that will be sort of like a prerequisite. We'll expect you to at least have watched the video to have an idea of what we'll be talking about, if not code along with it.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, I think this is a good time to take another quick POM. Let's come back at 11:11, 5 minutes. All right, for those of you who are back, could you either turn your video on or give me a reaction in Zoom so I know if we're all here? Great, thank you. All right. So I do have a few slides here. I think some of this might be repeated content from what I mentioned as we were looking at the backend page, but I want to make sure that I get through everything and don't leave anything important out. So we'll just go through them. And again, if questions come up, just use that raise hand reaction and I'll clarify stuff. So a little bit about the expectations that we have for you all as a class. The first is around attendance. We expect everyone to be at our online campus from 9 to 12 and 1 to 4 Mountain Time every weekday. We also ask that you respond to Slack messages within 24 hours. I think, if we've messaged you late on a Friday and you don't get back to it till Sunday or Monday, that's okay. But generally speaking, in the work week, we're looking for that level of responsiveness. We'll use I'm sorry, I didn't update these slides, but your backend Slack channel that I posted in this morning for announcements and the user group, which is the one that pings you when we need to notify you about something. And we always appreciate it when you leave an emoji on a message that we put in this backend channel just to let us know you've seen it. And sometimes we might require an emoji response to make sure that there is visibility on that message. So if we need you to confirm that you have read something, we'll say, please emoji with whatever to let us know that you've seen this. And we really appreciate your participation in that. It helps with this remote environment. That's one of the things that helps us make sure that we're communicating to you all what you need to know. You are expected to be present and on time for the classes and activities that are on the calendar. The way that we take attendance and the way that we're asked to take attendance as a school is that 1 minute late is counted as tardy, 30 minutes late is counted as absent. And also if you leave a class for more than 30 minutes at the end, then we count that as also an absence. All that being said, we really just ask that you communicate with us if there's some reason that you need to be late or need to be absent to a class. We understand that life comes up and definitely want to prioritize self-care for everyone. We just ask that you communicate that to us so we have an idea of what's going on. So as soon as you know that you will need to be late or need to be absent, we just ask for a quick Slack message to let us know, and that's that. When there is not a scheduled activity on the calendar, like when it's work time, that you may see a post in Slack for a thread to take attendance where you just post something in that thread and then we'll know that you're here for that work time. These will ping you, so no need to worry about missing them. As long as you have your notifications on for those pings. As far as in class, we ask that everybody is prepared to screen share during classes. And to do this, just double check that your Zoom settings allow screen sharing. You can do this by going to the system preferences area of your computer. Under security and privacy, microphone and camera, you'll need to make sure that Slack and Zoom are both selected. What I'll say is that, we in the recent past have mostly been using Zoom. I don't really use Slack calls for myself personally, but that might be something that you and your cohort mates choose to utilize, totally fine, or you and a mentor. But yeah, we do want everybody to be able to screen share. It helps with things like debugging and talking through code and, doing quick little code reviews or answering questions that are just difficult to describe without seeing the actual issue in front of us. So make sure that you're prepared to do that. Use the raise hand reaction when asking questions. I already mentioned that. The chat is really for fun. We're not monitoring it for questions. And yeah, we just want you to have that space to chat amongst yourselves. Again, if you do have a question that you don't want to raise your hand for, that's fine. Somebody else can raise their hand and ask your question in Zoom on the call if they have the same question. The Zoom call will be linked to the calendar events. Like I mentioned, we each have our personal meeting room, Kelly and I, and those are pinned in the cohort channel if you ever need them. We'll be uploading recordings of class to YouTube, and I would really encourage everybody to think of these as a tool for reviewing a class. There's no substitute for being engaged and active in a live class, but we upload these just in case, sometimes there are people who need to miss a class, or it can be really valuable to just go back and see the content again with a fresh set of eyes. So we'll also make sure that the playlist for this mod is pinned in the cohort channel. I already talked about, we ask that you have your videos on when possible. We just really like seeing your faces. And we ask that you use headphones to prevent any audio issues on either end with like echo or, you all not being able to hear us properly or vice versa. And if you don't have headphones and you need some, there should be a form pinned in announcements. Ramiro also mentioned this in State of Turing this morning. So you can get in contact with somebody on staff if you need that equipment and you don't have headphones. Those are really important to have. A couple of other things about class time. Not every class will follow the lesson plan exactly. We try to link a lesson plan in all of those calendar events, but occasionally there will be a lesson plan that acts more as a resource or a guide or further reading material for the subjects we'll talk about in class. The reason for this is we just all teach classes in a variety of ways. Kelly and I have different teaching styles, other instructors have different teaching styles, and everyone learns differently. So we do try to use class as a time where people can come and converse and ask questions and really dig into material rather than following a strict set of things that we have to talk about in one specific exact way. So if we don't follow the lesson plan exactly, that's just expected. We encourage you to read the lesson plans on your own if you notice that, especially if you notice that we're approaching it a little bit differently. Those can be a valuable resource just to review the material. Not everybody is in the same place. We all have a diversity of skills. Some people will struggle on Active Record, but feel great about HTML and CSS. Vice versa, other things like other areas might be particularly strong or not strong for any given person, and that's totally okay. That is, I think, the value of Turing is that we are all coming together and sharing this knowledge and learning together and growing together. So we want everyone to be learning something in every class. We want you all to have opportunities to try things on your own. Many classes will have sort of a choose your own adventure aspect to them. And if you find that this isn't the case, let us know. We are always happy to hear your feedback as students. It's so valuable to us to make sure that, we're still teaching in a way that's relevant and we're creating that space where everybody can learn something in every class. You can follow up with us individually, of course, through Slack with a DM, or you can fill out the weekly survey that will be in a calendar event every Friday on the Mod 2 backend calendar. I already mentioned the video homework. These will walk through building a Rails app called Setlist. This is an app where you'll have artists and songs and you'll be able to build these tables and relationships between artists and songs and kind of beyond even that behavior. And like I mentioned, these subjects will be covered in more detail in an upcoming class. And we definitely encourage you to have questions ready to ask at that point. We talked about the Mod 2 calendar. Definitely recommend adding it to your calendar if you can. The calendar events will link the Zoom meeting, the lesson materials. We don't typically do a class survey after every individual class, but there will be a calendar event for the weekly survey that we send out on Fridays. When we do have project check-ins and project evals and things of that nature, the signups will be linked in those calendar events. And at the end of a project, when there's a calendar event for you to submit your work, there will also be a survey linked in those events so you can let us know how the project went. And any thoughts that you had about the way the project was set up, et cetera. So yeah, there will be a calendar event for project due dates. That's where you will submit the project. There will be a Google form most times. And I already talked about the calendar event for the end of week survey, so we'll move on. That's an old slide. I'm going to skip that. Professional development should all be in that page that I mentioned earlier in the Mod 2 backend page. There's a link to the professional development curriculum that you'll be following this mod. And you will have, as far as last I heard, you will have these homeroom groups every Wednesday right after lunch. I'll go over this content about assessments and challenges again. I mentioned it, but if, just in case that wasn't clear the first time, we will have the mid-mod. Right now it's set for Monday of week 4, I believe. So the very beginning of week 4, getting ready to go into the later half of the mod. The final will be on Monday of week 6. There will be likely an opportunity to take an early bird final if you'd like to just get that out of the way late in week 5. We will do our best to put that on the calendar. And whether you take an early bird final or the final on Monday of week 6, you will still have an opportunity to do the retake on the following day, likely the Tuesday of week 6, if you don't pass. So that's open to either option, early bird or regular final assessment takers. There will be some independent assessments similar to the mid-mod, similar to the final, that allow you to time box yourself and see how far you can get in one of these assessments. We will not be providing individualized feedback on those the way that we will on the mid-mod, but hopefully, you know, those are a great chance for you to work through something similar and bring any questions to us either in, you know, the Code Help channel, a DM, or in class that are relevant to these assessments and challenges. There aren't any, there's no pre-work for any of these challenges. They're probably similar to the independent assessments you did in Mod 1 in that way. Yeah, you just will have a 3-hour chunk of time for these independent assessments where you'll be working independently. Yeah, and you can follow up with any questions that come up as a result of those challenges. We do have one on Monday of week 3, one on Monday of week 5, and then the Ruby challenge that I mentioned earlier today will be on Wednesday of week 5, and that won't be Rails. It'll be a chance to jump back into the Ruby that you've been writing over the past, you know, 6 to 8 weeks. And these are all good progress checks, but they don't count towards promotion. So really, these are informational. They're a chance for you to practice and get feedback. Speaking of feedback, we will have project check-ins and project evals. Both of these places are, both of these types of events are great places for you to get feedback on your work. We definitely would encourage everybody to come to these project check-ins and project evals with questions. Even if you haven't gotten super far in the project yet and it's just a check-in, if you have a question about a particular topic or how to implement something in your project, we encourage those questions. We might not always give you 100% of the answer. A running theme in Mod 2 is that we might give you 80% of what you need to implement something. And one of the skills that we hope you can continue to build in Mod 2 is going out on your own or with your team and researching with documentation and articles and resources that we've linked in the backend page to find what you need to get the job done. Of course, if you ask for feedback, just one-off feedback in a direct message or in Code Help, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And we do have the personalized videos coming up in the mid-mod. You know, you'll submit your mid-mod and we'll clone down your submission and walk through the code and give you a full-fledged review. And then for challenge reviews, we won't be doing individualized feedback, but we may take some time to review a challenge as a class, when you can definitely bring your questions to those Zoom calls as well. Excuse me. We talked a little bit about promotion. Essentially, we need everybody to complete the PD assignments, pass the final assessment or the retake, pass the final project, and then you're good to promote to Mod 3. The projects are graded mostly for you and for us to keep an eye on upward trajectory. The material in the mod does increase in difficulty as we go on. So if you're getting a steady string of like 2s and 3s and don't see that upward trajectory, that is probably okay for a big portion of the mod because the content is getting more difficult. But, you know, all that being said, these scores are really for you to have an understanding of where you're at and where you need to go before week 6. Weeks 1 through 5, we're really focusing on learning and experimenting and building on that knowledge. And week 6 is where we evaluate. So I'll go through these real quick. Yeah, so tips for being successful in Mod 2, the absolute #1 thing is to be engaged in class. I mentioned earlier, I recommend getting online a little bit before class starts, just to be sure you're in the right headspace and you're warmed up and ready to go. But part of this is also making sure that you're getting good sleep, right? You're taking care of yourself and getting the rest that you need. If getting a good breakfast or bringing a coffee with you to class or whatever it is, if that helps you be in the right mindset to work and explore and engage, then yeah, do that. That's really the #1 thing. And we do record these videos for you to review, but there's no substitute for being in class and being engaged and talking with your peers and that sort of stuff. I'd encourage everybody to be resourceful. We have the lesson materials that we share out. We have those recordings, and a very, very valuable skill that we hope you all are building actively in Mod 2 is research. So later in the mod, this might look like going through documentation for a new tool and trying to understand how to implement it in Rails and then configure it for your specific needs. So that is one thing that is not as easy for us to teach directly, but we try to give you lots of opportunities to do that exploration on your own and to do that research, reaching out to peers and mentors and reading through materials you have bookmarked and all that good stuff. On that note, though, we also really encourage you all to avoid unproductive struggle. So if you're not making progress, let's say taking that example of researching some documentation for a new tool, you don't need to continue doing that research if you're not making progress just because you're supposed to be reading and struggling and exploring. If you're working on the same bug for 30 or 45 minutes, that's probably a good sign to take a break, talk to a cohort mate, try something else for a little while, because the unproductive struggle can really just slow you down in a project and inhibit your learning. So we want productive struggle. We want some of these uncertainties and unknowns to become knowns. We don't want you spinning your wheels for hours working on the same bug. That's not really why we're here. So if you're working on a project before comprehending the lesson materials, it might be very tempting to go out and really try to understand 100% of the lesson materials before implementing it on the project. And that's not always the way to go. Sometimes you need to just really work with something and wrestle with it a little bit to see it in action and get the takeaways that we're hoping that you get. On the other hand, prioritizing a project so much that you're not going back and reviewing the content from a lesson that's still fuzzy, that can also cause bugs that you don't know how to solve, that kind of thing. So you really want to strive for a balance and just keep an eye on the clock. Take lots of Pomodoros would be my recommendation to make sure that you're avoiding that unproductive struggle. Definitely reach out for help early and often on that note. I think the most important and most valuable resource that you have as a cohort is each other. I'm hoping that people can hop on Zoom calls and work through things together. Of course, there will be a pair project and a group project where hopefully you'll be collaborating pretty consistently with some people in your cohort. There's also upper mod students. Those are people who are a great resource when you can reach out to them and ask for advice or ask for resources. That's another great one. Mentors. I will say if you have a mentor, that's great. Be sure to make the most of that situation and take advantage of their offer of help to you. But if you don't have a mentor that you're meeting with regularly, or you'd like to network a little bit more, please feel free to reach out to Kelly and I. We'll do our best to get you set up with somebody. And then of course, we are here as instructors to answer your questions and try to point you in the right direction. I do recommend for most things, unless it's very individualized, very specific, if you can post in the Code Help channel and tag us, we'll get to it when we can. Like I said earlier, there's a lot more of you than there are us, so it's possible a cohort mate will get to it before we will, but you can always reach out to us for more clarity or answers to questions or nudges in the right direction as far as researching new tools, et cetera. And also debugging. We will help as much as our availability allows, but we definitely encourage that collaboration with your cohort mates as a first step. And like we talked about earlier today, I will need to look into our student support situation for this mod because I'm not totally clear on where we're at with that. That's all the material I have today. So I'm going to stop sharing and just open it up for any questions that have come up. Dane.
Yeah, as far as like projects go, is it possible, or I guess, is it okay for us to ask for like an additional project check-in? Should we need it at any given time? Like if maybe we're not where we might want to be at a certain point in time when that project check-in comes, can we ask for like one like the next day? Is that something that we can independently schedule with one of you, or?
Yeah, I think that's really going to depend upon the week and our availability, unfortunately. We try to, for a couple of the longer projects, there will be multiple project check-ins. That being said, if you want to schedule another like sync up with one of us, you can always DM us and see if we have the time. We really try to make time for that and answer questions, especially if it's, a quick call to clarify a few things. or to figure out like a game plan going forward, for lack of a better word. Let's see, what was the other thing? The other thing, I will be posting later today a link for scheduling squishies with me, and I think Kelly will probably have their own link. But I see those mostly as an opportunity to just like kind of touch base on non-technical issues. They're 20 minutes long, so it's not a lot of time. But if you want to touch base about, you know, your progress in the mod, or, you know, go through any like networking stuff, or get a little bit of feedback on a small piece of code, that's a great time to do that as well. And I post my availability, I'll update it weekly. And I try to have, you know, a good 3 hours of time set aside on, you know, the weeks where I can to just meet with people and talk about whatever's on your mind. And that can definitely include some technical stuff. Just throwing out there that it is a shorter session. It might not be as robust as a full check-in, but we try to put some stuff on the calendar to supplement. Does that, any follow-up on that, Dane? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers it. Thank you so much.
Great, no problem. Yeah, and like I said, I expect that link later today. I still need to update my availability, but I'll pin it in the channel. What other questions do you all have? Let's see, let's go to Karina.
Yeah, I guess to kind of build off of that, you guys do have set office hours on the calendar. Is that kind of a similar thing, just to be able to pop in and ask questions on things we may need, or what is that time mainly used for?
Sure. So the ones that you're seeing on the calendar right now, I believe everything we've put on the calendar, it follows like a pretty big lesson. So the idea there is that we would prioritize any questions that have to do with the lesson we just covered. Let's see, do I have a calendar handy? Yeah, so for example, tomorrow I'm teaching the intro to databases and ORMs, and then I'll have office hours just after that. Really, it's meant to be time for extra questions that we didn't have time to get to in class. But that being said, there's not always a lot of questions right there, like immediately after the class. So if other things are coming up, then I'm happy to get to those as well. Yeah, and that's how I see those office hours. But Kelly, anything to add there?
Oh. Nope, that's perfect.
Cool. Yeah, so it's a flexible time, but we do try to prioritize questions that have to do with the content that we just taught. We may add more. We'll see how the calendar shakes out over the next couple of weeks. Antonio?
Yeah, regarding the cohort retro at the end of the week, are you familiar with, I know in Mod 1, the instructors did retro, but for this, I think Student Leadership Committee will be doing the first one. Is that correct?
Yeah, good question. The way that we've done it in Mod 2 in the past is that Student Leadership Committee leads all the retros, and we have those on the calendar for 11 to 12 Mountain Time. That's when we have our staff retro. So it's just kind of worked out that way. I know that Emma posted a message about SLC reps. So yeah, I have been operating under the assumption that we'll have some very awesome SLC reps assigned by Friday. Yeah, basically instructors in Mod 2 have not been attending retro. That's y'all's time.
Thanks.
No problem. What other questions do you all have? All right, awesome. I think then we are all set on today's Mod 2 kickoff. Oh, another question, Antonio, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned this, and not to put you on the spot at all, but I was just curious, is this how many times have you taught Mod 2 backend?
Since February. So 1, 2, I think this is my fourth cohort teaching, yeah.
Okay, is this the only one you've, like, is it specifically Mod 2 that's your specialty?
I don't know if I'd say that. That's been my mod assignment since I joined Turing. Yeah, I've only taught Mod 2, so.
Cool. I was just curious.
Totally. Okay. Yeah, I think that's everything in that case. You all can definitely get a little bit of time back. I'm glad we have a little bit of time left over. I wanted to ask and check in with you all. Did anybody have any issues getting their environment set up or gym installation issues or anything like that that we can troubleshoot today? I guess I'll end it here. Thank you all for being here. I know this was kind of a hefty session and I was talking a lot, but yeah, if any questions come up, send them to us on Slack. You can feel free to go ahead and take an early lunch, but if there is something you'd like help troubleshooting with your environment or any of the setup with your gems and tools and stuff, your database, whatever, I'll keep this call open until noon in case anybody has something to work through. Thanks, folks. See you this afternoon, if not right now.
Thank you.
Brett.
Yes, so it was just a question about the gem installation.
Sure.
So when I did the bundle install for the first time, a variety of the gems didn't install properly, so I had to uninstall them and then reinstall them.
Okay.
And it got it to work. I just didn't know, is there like a reason why that happened or something I could avoid in the future? I just didn't.
Right. I think with that amount of information, I don't think there's anything you could have done differently or better necessarily. Sometimes gems just need to be updated. But my follow-up question for you is, did you have any issues with, your Ruby version or your Rails version not getting set to the version that you want?
Oh, I guess so, yeah. I had to change it a variety of times just to make sure, like troubleshooting. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you have an example of something that is, it sounds like you already got it fixed, so there's not really a whole lot for us to look at together, which is fine. But my recommendation would be if you're running into gem issues and then you run Ruby-V and notice, oh, my Ruby version isn't what I thought it was, that's probably what should take priority over installing the gems, because your Ruby version will have a lot to do with how bundler works. Yeah, if anything specific comes up again, there are a few things that we could try, like a few tricks I have in my back pocket, I guess, because I've run into a lot of these gem issues. But if you uninstalled a gem and reinstalled it and everything worked just fine, that's a totally okay approach. I would expect that to happen once in a while.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks. Dane?
Yeah, so I had an issue, the same thing that actually Karina was having on Friday, which was that I had a PG gem that wasn't working, and it took me forever to figure it out. And I finally figured it out. The only reason why I did was because I was able to use something called sudo. And I don't actually know, other than a permission thing, is that something that we should be using? Kind of, I don't know if it's willy-nilly, but just in general, is that something that is okay to use, to kind of force permission, or?
In general, you want to avoid using sudo. It can be very destructive, and yeah, it does have to do with your permissions, and it's a little bit of a sledgehammer of a tool when it comes to the command line. And I am not an expert on this by any means, but what we have noticed sometimes, and what I've noticed, is that when people use sudo, sometimes things get installed in places that are unexpected, and they can cause the gem file especially to behave in unexpected ways. So if you're not running into any issues after running that, don't worry about it. Don't let it keep you up at night. But in the future, I'd try to find a solution that doesn't involve sudo. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Awesome, thanks.
No problem. Amanda, what can we help you with?
So in order to get my PG bundle to work, I had to reinstall Homebrew as the x86, and I wasn't sure if that was going to cause any issues in the future.
Gotcha. Not that I know of. I think, do you by chance have the M1 chip? Yeah, I think that's expected with the M1 chip. Kelly, anything to add? I don't remember if you also have that.
No, but that's expected from it. Don't worry about it. I had to do that myself the other day.
Okay, yeah, it seems to be working, but I just wasn't sure if that was going to cause any future issues.
Not that I know of.
Thanks.
Sure. Was everybody able to get through Task Manager without any Postgres or any issues with Postgres or Rails that inhibited your progress? That's good to hear. I'm really glad. All right, well, any other questions that we can answer for you all before lunch or issues we can help you look into? All right. I'm going to go ahead and end out the call. Questions come up, send us a DM. Thanks, everybody.